Hello, and welcome back to Sharing a Chapter a Day. This is Me, and today I will be reading Chapter 40 of Engagement in Peril by Dara, Odoe, Sup. Chapter 40 is titled United States Navy. Boot Camp, Basic Training. The night before I left for boot camp, Mother brought over a monk to our apartment on Lime Avenue to have him bless me for my journey away from home. The elder monk, with his head shaved, wore his traditional orange-yellow robe. Softly and with some comfort, he spoke with my mother about who I was and what type of character I am, and what I would become, while he looked at his mystical card of his tarot cards of my past and future. He then told my mother of future events and trial that I will go through in the future. He then had me sit beside my mother in a respectful fashion, where I overlapped my legs with my elbows and hand touching the floor, while we both prayed to our gods and ancestors as he chanted his ancient native blessing. He then got up, stepped outside of the apartment for a bit, and returned with a branch that he had torn off from the nearby tree. He then proceeded to dip the leaf branch that he tore off into the bucket of water that was nearby, which he had already blessed with his candle wax and spit. He spat through his ancient chanting, and while I was praying and such, on my hands and knee below him, he whipped the wet branch over my shoulder and back from side to side. His chants include calling upon my ancestor to look over me, to guide me, to help me stay true to myself and those with me. The monk then read my future. He read my fortune. He informed me I would make a great farmer, and after all the chanting and praying, he had my mother bathe me in the water that he had already blessed with his spit and candle wax. That was the Dara I knew then. You allowed a total stranger to curse and put hexes on you for your mother's peace of mind and security. You were quite self-giving then. You're one funny kid back then, Dara. Whatever happened to that innocent, naive kid? I guess you have grown somewhat out of your shell, but then again, there have been others who have cursed you with illnesses and disillusion. Now, while I sat in the bathtub in my shorts, Mother chanted gently and gently poured the blessed water atop my head and body, while the elder monk guided her with her words and action upon me. I allowed my mother to do this to me for her own security. I knew she didn't want me to join the armed services in the first place, so I gave her this peace that she wanted for me to keep safe and comforted by our ancestor. Mother wanted to make sure that I be safe in my military endeavor, career, no matter where I may be, whether it's in peace or wartime. My ancestor will watch and protect over me. For some strange reason, those blessings and chants worked their mysterious magic on me throughout my military career and endeavor because of the voodoo that they do so well. I was never once sent to war or into hostile territory, although I tried many times to go to those places voluntarily, and many times I was denied, refused, and not allowed to go into those areas. After several weeks of seclusion at home away from friends and school, often preparing myself mentally and physically, on the 23rd of July, 1995, I boarded an American airline commercial plane from LAX and headed for Great Lake, Illinois. Before I had to leave for my new life, MEPS had me stay the night at the Doubletree Hotel in Los Angeles, so that I may await for my departure the next day, early that morning. During the previous day, a group of young men and women and myself who enlisted in the armed services were betrothed into the United States Navy. We would raise our right hand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and its armed services. The Doubletree Hotel was pretty nice. I had my own room. It was the first time that I had ever been in a hotel room by myself and such. And we were given free voucher for dinner and breakfast to dine in with the kitchen staff. I had a pretty good meal. That night I had steak, vegetable, mashed potato, gravy, biscuit, soda and such. After my meal, I returned to my room and watched some television, of which I ended up masturbating while watching the adult channel. And after I was worn out from jacking off and the self-mutilation, I showered and then went to bed. I awoke around 05:30 the next morning and freshened up and got ready for the departure. After packing all my gears and supply, I made my way downstairs with my backpack and document to the mess hall for breakfast. I had eggs, sausage, bacon, and toast for breakfast and afterward, and several other recruits who were scheduled to depart the day we were taken to the airport on a bus. Once we got to LAX, we all departed from the charter bus and headed toward our designated gate to board our preordained flight that was already scheduled ahead of time several weeks earlier. We all checked in at our designated gate, airlines, and was instructed to head to our departing gates. I boarded the American Airlines flight and headed to Chicago, Illinois. After 5 hours or so on the plane, I finally arrived at Chicago O'Hare International Airport around 2300 that night, and had to catch an awaiting shuttle to the basic training command in Great Lakes from there. Besides myself in the shuttle, there were several other people headed to the same destination. We were all newbies then, fresh out of high school and anxious of what was about to happen to us. We all sat quietly in the shuttle, lost in our own thoughts, and the only words I heard were from the shuttle driver, who told us that he had picked up several groups of recruits earlier that day from the same area, going to the same boot camp. And they too were just as quiet as we were. None of us replied to the driver's comment. We seemed scared and timid, but mentally I was prepared and ready to get things started. Once we arrived to the command, there were several people in uniform waiting for us. Once the van's door opened, the first word I heard from the uniformed personnel was, "Get your fucking asses in the building and keep your damn mouths shut." He pointed in the direction of a large concrete building that was several feet away from us. Once in the confined building, they had us stand in line while they yelled and spat in our direction, screaming for us to stand straight and still. First off, we went through the necessary paperwork that was required of new recruits, and once that was done, we were allowed to make one phone call to anywhere we wanted, and it was charged to the government's dime. I called the only place I knew. I called home and told Mother that I had arrived safely to Great Lakes and boot camp. And with warm tears trickling down my bewildered cheeks, my voice was beginning to choke up. I told Mom that I had missed her. I wished her and my sibling well and good health and said goodbye for the next several months of my life away from her. That was the only time I spoke to my mother for the next 8 weeks. After using up my one allotted phone call, we were then ushered into a small room that had rows of urinals. This was where we had to take a piss test. And if you couldn't go right away there and then, they made you get your ass in the back of the line, drink some water, and go again. So, I had never had someone watch me pee before. It felt weird, and I couldn't go right away, so I got to the back of the line, drank some water from the water fountain, and finally, after the second time around, I was able to piss into a clear plastic cup, and then handed the container to one of the medical personnel there, who was documenting and labeling our urine specimen with our names and social security number. I didn't pay much attention to the other recruits around me. I kept myself focused on myself. After nervously pissing, we were then led to the next hall, where we had our immunization shot. We all lined up. We all marched through the aisle, and 2 needle shotguns were given to each side of our upper arms and deltoid area by several corpsmen then. With some stinging and some slight sharp pain, we all moved forward and onward. We were all given all sorts of shots, from flu shot to tetanus, and then our medical exam was given. For those who wore glasses, they were examined and given new prescription for new glasses. We then had our color visual check, an eye clarity test, and I was issued a pair of thick plastic BC birth control glasses. It didn't matter if you were a male or female. If you wore glasses, you were issued birth control glasses. We all wore identical pairs of glasses during basic because we had to be uniform. Those glasses were called birth control glasses because they were quite ugly, with thick dark brown frames and plastic lenses, and once a dame or fella looked at you in them, he or she didn't want anything to do with you because you were so ugly wearing them. After having our medical exam and physical done, we then had our head shave and our haircuts. There was no choice for style of haircut. All male were shaven, their head shaved, and the female had their hair shortened above their collar while having their head shaved and cut. Some recruit cried over their loss of hair, which gave their trainer something to laugh at about while they watched us. After having our heads shaved and trimmed, we were then ordered back in line again, and then our sweat clothes and physical training gear were issued. As a group, we then had to get undressed in front of each other. It seemed demeaning at the time we were having to change in front of a total stranger, but it was the routine. They were getting us used to how life would be from now on, while at basic, there was no privacy at basic. The first day of processing seemed to take forever. We weren't allowed to rest until 0400 the next morning. I think we only had an hour of shut-eye or so. Our first day there at boot camp. After they woke us up, and again they marched us to the uniform building for measurement and clothing fitting. The next morning started with more paperwork and more uniform and clothing issue. At the clothing and uniform issue warehouse, we were issued 4 sets of dungarees, 4 blue long sleeve button shirt, and 4 pairs of blue bell bottom jeans, 2 working and 2 dress white uniform, 2 working blues with a tie and a dress blue crackerjack uniform, a dress shoe, a large green sea bag, a pair of wooden boondockers boots, a pea coat, a raincoat, 4 Dixie cup fitted to the size of your head, 6 pairs of white socks, 2 pairs of black dress socks, 8 pairs of underwear, 8 pairs of t-shirt, 2 blue shorts, a swim trunk, and a padlock for keeping our belongings safe. We then packed everything into the large sea bag that were issued and marched to our living quarters, we call ships. Little did I know then that someone was watching and following my every move there at the beginning of basic in Great Lakes, Illinois. Since the moment I was in line to piss my urine test that previous night. The stalker was you, Shinshin Nagami. He had been watching me as though I was some subject of interest to him then. I and Shinshin were placed in Company 388. Our ship was Ship 13, located at the far end side of the entire base, about several miles away from the main personnel building. We had to hump the several miles with everything we were given and issued, and since none of us were used to this type of strenuous exercise before, we were all easily tired and worn out, but we kept going, while those in the charge were yelling and screaming at us to keep going. I still stuck to myself for the most part. I didn't bother speaking to anyone around me. All I remember was that when they called my name and told me where to go, I didn't listen to anyone's name. Not for someone like Shinshin. Little did I know that he could have become the future heartbreak of my life. I guess they were trying to get us to walk in step. The heavy gear we carried was taking a toll on our backs, and we all showed signs of fatigue and pain as we marched onward toward the back of the large training base and command. Once we arrived to our ship and were told to stand in line while we were waiting for our RDC, recruit division commanders, still with the pack attached to our back and with the pain was unbearable, we waited until after a long while we were then allowed to rest. We met our recruit division commander, our RDC instructor, at our barracks ship 13, and there were 3 of them who were in charge of my assigned company of 388. One of our commander was First Class Petty Officer Boatswain Mate Ettenbeck, who had already served over 15 years in the Navy and been on multiple military ships and aircraft carrier, and who later made Chief Petty Officer before we graduated from boot camp that fall. Another was Second Class Gas Turbine System Mechanist Tesh, who was the crybaby of the 3 instructors. He complained about every little thing and punished us for the minor infraction we did. And he was also allergic to bee stings. So every time a bee flew by, he would jump and rant and we all would get a laugh out of it. The last of our RDC was my favorite, Second Class Quartermaster Edwin, who was the coolest of all 3 RDC, who looked out for me and the other recruit during our rigorous 8 weeks of training there at Basic, Great Lakes, Illinois. The first thing they did have us do was drop to our stomach and into push-up position. We had to be in push-up position while they introduced themselves. It seemed forever while they spoke. They spoke slowly. They took their sweet time telling us who they were, what they did, and what they expected of us. After their proper introduction, they got us started on tidying up our barracks. We had to strip down the living quarter, floor to the bare, and resurface it with new wax and such, and then we had to assemble our sleeping racks accordingly. 2 columns of bed with another about 24 rows on each side. The task was divided up, and some of us painted the wall, and some of us cleaned up the floor and the room of debris and trash. We also wiped down windows and mirrors and bathroom. I helped with moving of the metal racks bunk outside the building and assembling them back into our living quarters after the living quarter was ready for reassembly. After all the tasks and spaces were cleaned and completed, we were given a 5-minute break. And afterward, this was where I first met and introduced myself to Shinshin. Shinshin Agami, my beloved, who had broken my heart as of late, after a quick break and relaxation, back to reality. We were swooped back on our hands and knees. Our RDC instructed us on how to fold our clothes and how to store them in a small cubicle space, just like the space they have on an actual ship. We learned to properly tie our shoes and how to take care of ourselves, from brushing our teeth to washing our balls. We went through 9 weeks of training physically and mentally. We learned to march in groups, run in groups, and we also got punishing as a group. Everything we did was about group work and teamwork. A company of brothers who look out for each other. That was our motto. Teamwork and leave no man behind. We were all a group of different men, but all with one identical purpose then. We also practiced rifle drills and studied the rules and regulation of the naval and military laws and history. We weren't allowed to wear any jewelry or watch at boot camp. And only the AROC and the RPOC were allowed to wear watches, so that they could keep track of our appointments and duty throughout our 9 weeks together at Basic. We all had to wear our dog tags at all times, no matter what, in the shower, in our sleep, and during our duties of watch and security. Our dog tags were our lifeline. That's what they would say. Each of us were issued 2 dog tags that had our full name, social security number, blood type, and religious preference inscribed on it. These dog tags kept us awake because they would rattle as we marched or made any slight movement. At times, we would accidentally rattle our dog tag in synchronized motion and sounds. Each evening, about 30 minutes before taps, bedtime, we were allowed to write letters and shines our boot. I would write to most of my friends, but only Benevolence would write me back. In her reply letter, she would wish me luck and good health and told me what was going on in Long Beach and how how City College I was going on for her. Her letter helped me keep going and let me know that there were people out there who hadn't forgotten about me. I didn't bother writing to my mother or my sibling. I didn't want them to worry about me. As for my newfound friend Shinshin, I never saw him write anything to anyone. He was so strange then, so secluded, and he kept to himself. But he was hardcore about training, and he was the best of all of us in that company of 388, especially when it comes to being physically capable. He wasn't that much taller than me, but he was so damn strong, just like the Incredible Hulk. And he was quite in shape, bulking in the right places. On weekends, we would have more time to write and iron our clothes. Some of us would go to the base chapel to worship, but most of us would stay behind in the barrack, sneaking some extra sleep. Shinshin wasn't around much during the weekend. He seemed to wake before anyone and everyone and go do his own thing on his own. I have no idea where he went, but he always kept to himself. He spoke to me when he felt like it, and that was that. You're right, Dara. Shinshin was quite the mysterious person then. He liked or preferred to be alone at most. He only spoke when he really had something to say, and he was so strong that way. After all, Shinshin was my idol and beloved, and I must admit, I did have a boyish admiration for Shinshin then. I had that boyish crush on him when we first met at Basics. Although we weren't allowed to sleep in during our free weekends and during the hours of the day, we would take turns sleeping anyway, with someone watching out for everyone. So instead of sleeping on our mattress and preventing disorder and any out of the ordinary thing that we get random bed check, we would sleep under the bunk bed on the floor, always cautious of our RDC and those in charge of the building where we were staying at. We were all quite conniving then. You learn tricks and trade as you grow older in years and during training. We all learned fast and always looking for the easy way to do things. And if we knew we could get away with it, that's what we did, except for Shinshin. Of course, he was so hardcore about the rules and regulation then. I do miss him though. I sadly remember how straightforward Shinshin was. We also had to learn to clean and maintain our assault rifle and guns. We had to dismantle and reassemble the rifle in a set time. It was one of those requirements for graduation from basic training. As time passed, I grew to be quite proficient with the assembly and dismantling of the gun and rifle. And of course, better than me was Shinshin. He was much faster and more fluid than anyone there in our company. Maybe it was his thug life of growing up with gangs in foster home during his youth and the teen years that got him to be so good at that sort of thing. I had no idea then where Shinshin had come from and who he really was. I was just in awe of being able to bask in his presence. Just like Kelly then. The first time I saw her, Shinshin had a radiant aura about him. Damn, was I being weird then? But then again, if you knew Shinshin, you too would fall head over heel over him. He just had that sort of presence about him. We went to sleep at 2200 and woke around 0400 most of the time, and everywhere we go, we had to march to our destination. To the chow hall, to class, to various inspection and events. March here, march there, march everywhere. During our first week of getting used to the routine and set standard, our RDC asked for volunteers for designated jobs that each recruiting company at Basic must have. The position will recruit petty officer in charge, the RPOC, who was the leader of and responsible for all the recruits in the specific company, who led us in the marching and such. There was the assistant recruit petty officer in charge, the ARPOC, whose duty includes singing the cadence during our marches and second in command to the RPOC. Another position was the master at arms, whose duty was security and safety for all recruits in the company. There's the starboard watch leader and the aft watch leader, whose duty were overlooking and responsibility of recruits in their stations, whether it be in the front or the aft or the starboard of the building. Also, there's the post petty officer, the Popo, whose duty was to pick up and take the mail to and from the post office. This was what Shinshin and Gami ended up doing for us the entire 8 weeks together. There's also a religious petty officer whose duty was to help console and make appointment to see the base chaplain at command base on the person's religious and personal matter that a priest or chaplain may be able to help them with. RDC told us that they needed us 7 stickmen whose duty was to march their whole company around from place to place, and there were several other jobs. As we all know now, I ended up being a stickman. Well, the best goddamn stickman for Company 388, of course. Our RDC wanted everyone to participate and volunteer for duties and position. One thing that RDC told us that stuck with me that to this day, everyone watches is over everyone. Without having to volunteer, I was designated as one of the 7 stickmen who would lead the company to and from various places throughout the massive command. I was stickman number 1, and I carried Company 388 giant purple flag. The flag that I had to bear was this large, ugly lavender flag with a nasty-looking bug that was dressed in military fatigue and was heavily armored with various weapons such as guns, knives, and grenades. The massive bug was our company's mascot, and I had to bear it with weight against all sorts of weather then during our basic training at Great Lakes, Illinois. Yep, Dara, you were quite the color coordinator then, with that purple flag and your blue dungarees and boondockers. In all, you held your own, Dara. Really proud of you for doing your task at your best. I prop you for once your vital self. Thank you for listening. This is the end of Chapter 40. Be on the lookout for Chapter 41, titled Division, Classifications, and Tasks. This is Do, Ra, Mi, and I'll see you later. Thank you.